Hey guys, it's Jason, the lead safety and technical trainer with Tyndale. Welcome back for another installment of 70E Made Easy. A little bit of review up front, but today we're going to talk about one of the most important steps to keep you safe, which is Article 130.4 E, F, and G. This is the electric shock approach boundaries, and it's one of the most misunderstood topics in the 70E. Last time we covered E through F. In this episode, we're going to talk about G, which describes your shock protection boundary known as the restricted approach boundary. Let's review 130.4E. It says the electric shock protection boundaries identified as limited approach boundary and restricted approach boundary shall be applicable where personnel are approaching exposed energized electrical conductors or circuit parts. Then it goes on to tell us about the two tables used to figure out these distances. Again, we covered this in the last video, but for both of these episodes, I used 130.4EA, which is our table for AC voltages. 130.4EB is going to be for your DC voltages and is very important, especially with EV, PV, battery storage, etc., being so busy these days. So to sum up 130.4E, there are two shock boundaries, right? Again, one is for that unqualified person, so they can't reach in and touch your work or your exposed parts. And the other one is the restricted approach boundary. That's the one we're going to focus on today. That one's closer to the hazard and is for you, if you're the qualified worker, to understand when to start using your safe work practices, such as some insulated tools, your PPE, maybe energized work permits, that kind of stuff. So let's look at the table for a specific example. Typically, you're going to be focused on column number 4, which is a restricted boundary to exposed parts. For most of you, you're going to be working on electrical equipment that's below 750 volts. So you can see your boundary is going to be 1 foot or 12 inches, whatever you're most comfortable using. As your voltage increases, of course, you can see that your boundary increases. So you want to make sure you pay attention to that. Let's get into more detail about 130.4G. It tells us that no qualified person shall approach or take any conductive object closer to exposed energized electrical conductors or circuit parts than the restricted approach boundary set forth in that table 130.4EA, unless one of the following conditions applies. There's 2 of them. This is easy, folks. It ain't rocket science. Number 1, the qualified person is insulated or guarded from energized electrical conductors or circuit parts, of course, operating at 50 volts or more, right? In other words, you are insulated from the parts, right? That would be typically your gloves. Insulated gloves and sleeves are considered insulation only with regard to the energized part upon which the work is performed. Or number 2, another easy one, the energized electrical conductors or circuit parts are insulated from you, the qualified person, and from any other conductive object at a different potential. So basically, again, either you are insulated from the parts or the parts are insulated from you. So part of your job is to determine risk, right? And most of you have seen these types of terminations. It would be very difficult to contact live parts on the fuse holder on the left and the terminal block on the right, because the screws are buried in there. You'd have to be working really hard. So in my opinion, you may not need gloves within 12 inches of those 2 things, right? Whereas the guarded terminal blocks in the middle still have exposed parts that could be contacted. Now, every company can make that determination for their employees, and they should. I have some companies that would side with what I just said, and then some that say if you cross the plane of that control panel, you need to have your shock PPE on. Any way you decide is just fine as long as it's documented, etc. Procedures need to be documented and trained and audited for compliance. Also, just to be clear, only qualified people may enter that restricted approach boundary, right? Because there's some rules, those energized work permits, the PPE, the tools, etc. Also, you're never going to be setting up a physical barricade like we talked about at the 12-inch restricted approach boundary. The minimum distance for your physical barricade will always be at least the limited approach distance that's listed in table 130.4EA or B and based entirely on your voltage level, right? In this case, your physical barricade would be set at 42 inches away from exposed and energized parts. And don't forget that pesky little thing called the Energized Electrical Work Permit that is required in some situations when you enter or cross that restricted approach boundary. This wraps up the electric shock risk assessment. These last three videos, I strongly encourage you to get into the 70E text and read for yourself. This is absolutely one of the most important steps to keep you safe. In the next several videos, we're going to talk about the arc flash risk assessment and how to do that. So we're going to see you next time, and make sure that you're staying safe out there.